You're watching Byline Wilmington on CBS 10 WILM. Here's your host, Don Ansell.
Okay, we're back. Our guests are New Hanover County Commissioner Bill Castor and the chair of the Solid Waste Advisory Board, a board that was appointed to study the issue of solid waste and disposal in New Hanover County, Claud Buck O'Shields. So we built this incinerator on a referendum in the 80s, I believe it was. Give us a little timeline on how that played out. It was originally put to referendum, was built, and then there was an upgrade, wasn't there, at some point?
Yeah, they did another bond referendum, and that was passed, and that's when they added the second unit out there. And
it was upgraded in the 90s.
Yeah, it must have been in the 90s, or it came online in 91 because they had a committee at that time that looked at the operations of Waste Tech, made some recommendations.
So the county, I did a little research. I think you've spent about $40 million building it, upgrading it. Yeah, something like that. And do you think it should continue?
Again, intuitively, I think so. But we've got to prove to me, for one, and I think to citizens, that it's cost effective to do that. But and if it's not working to maximum efficiencies and all that, then it may well not be.
But it's been operating since 1981. How long does it take to figure that out?
Well, good question. I'll take the blame for it too. But the other thing was, before we were running it strictly on tax money, about the mid 2000s. We went to an enterprise fund where it's got to pay for itself. We're not taking tax revenue out to support it. So now when we saw what it was costing.
So you don't know what to do with it yet. You're not sold yet?
No, I'm. That's why again we put these people in place, and we're going to have this proposal for these companies to come in and say how they would run it, and some of them, I think,
how they would run Waste Tech.
No,
the whole issue of solid waste management.
Of solid waste. And I think, well, let me just say, I think there's some of them that see that they can do it or do it better or more efficiently, and that's what I want to see, what they're coming up.
You studied the problem, the issue. The board gave recommendations. What was your recommendation about the incinerator?
Well, the recommendation was basically to keep it in-house with some management improvements, or some program improvements. One was to fund Waste Tech. Everybody has said that Waste Tech is the integral part of the waste management program in Hanover County.
So
regardless of cost.
Your board said keep Waste Tech, put money into it, and upgrade it.
Right. To provide the maintenance that it should have and should have had through the years to make it run at 85 to 90% efficiency. Secondly was to look to a private hauler to contract with them to haul some of the waste that would normally go to our landfill for it to be taken to a third-party landfill. And then to move forward with the methane gas program, to move forward with the recycling program.
Let's focus on that for just a second, on recycling. I don't think anyone would disagree, or maybe you would, that recycling would be the first choice for solid waste disposal.
Everything you could.
Everything you can.
Right.
So my next question is, why hasn't the county put more resources into the effort of recycling?
We've got stations all over the county for people to take it to. I know what you're going to say. But when we looked at forcing people to recycle, and I'll give an example. I lived in Lansdowne when it got annexed, by the way, and the next thing we've got city trash, and along with that, you got a recycling bin that you paid for. It's a separate fee. I'd say in my neighborhood, 50% or less actually recycled.
When was that?
That was when the last annexation took place.
How many years ago?
Was that 98?
Yeah, I would say, wouldn't you say there's a different mindset in America today?
Well, I hope so. But then when we looked in the unincorporated area of the county, how many residents there were, and then how many customers different haulers had, it was a whole lot less than the residents, which then made us think that there are certain, like in certain areas where mom and dad live next door to the son, only one of them gets trash and all that. So if we'd go to automatic recycling again, that you had to do, you'd have to pay for it, whether you particularly want to or not, or whether you use it or not, or maybe you don't need to use it because you're partnering with your son or your neighbor or something like that. So that's what I backed off on, forcing people to be recycled. I happen to be, before you get further,
yeah.
I happen to be a big recycler, by the way,
yeah.
and I live on a private street, so we're not getting a bucket out in front, and I save it all in my garage and haul it off to Blair School or the Moose Lodge.
Let me just say that we had a situation, you had a situation in New Hanover County recently where the county closed a recycling point at Murrayville. The outcry was pretty strong.
Agree.
First of all, and then you reopened it.
Right.
So isn't that evidence that people are ready for curbside recycling?
We'll see. But I'll also say the reason they closed that thing down was because people were out there making such an earned mess of the place, like they do at Blair School where I go and all that, that if I was a company or something and that was on my property, I'd be upset too. So we've met, we've met the enemy and he's us.
Should the county take some responsibility for how it's organized out there? I mean,
I
go.
don't know how you organized. You either put the stuff in the bin or you don't.
I go to a recycling point in Brunswick County where they have an attendant, and he's very. You don't throw anything away till he comes out and says.
Well, that's another one. Then that costs that much more money then because you have to manage.
Would it not be worth it?
Well, I actually go some places that do that in other states too, but we can take a look at. But that's the downside is that there's an additional cost. And with recycling, again, you're talking the wrong guy. I'm really for it, except we find out a lot of times that we can't do anything with it. There's no market for it now, so you're not making any money.
That was my other question.
So you end up burning it anyway.
I think people are suspicious about what happens to stuff they recycle.
Well, the mandate from the EPA back in the 70s, and it's trickled on down to the state where they're saying every year you've got to reduce the amount of waste you landfill by a certain number of tons or percentage. And when recycling became the mandate in the 70s with industrial waste and household waste, the markets were flooded with it, and it became a non-item. There was no market for it. You had to pay to get it taken away. And I don't want to say anything for the city, but I think that's basically what they almost have to do now is to pay to get rid of it. It doesn't have a dollar value. So if you're going to recycle, then there's going to be expense involved in it, not just necessarily picking it up at the curbside, but getting it moved from that pile to someplace else that'll use it.
And then what happens to it? We'll talk about, Bill, we're going to take a break. We'll come right back and talk more about where do we go from here. Stay with us.
Good.